2001 was an interesting year.
Practicing fuzzy math again. There's differences.
Had George W. Bush sworn in as president, which led to more than 400,000 dead people in the Middle East, mainly because of this guy.
So, you all set to go hunting? Sorry, I thought you were a deer.
And of course, the huge thing that everyone remembers is, of course, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring came out, and I couldn't possibly think of any other event happening during that year. But on November 15th, a show aired on the BBC, being Walking with Beasts, a sequel to Walking with Dinosaurs, which came out 2 years before and was once again produced by Tim Haynes and crew and had Kenneth Branagh as narrator. And to set the record straight, having Bertie Carvel narrate the new Walking with Dinosaurs was basically a war crime, almost as bad as Dick Cheney's. This series, once again, was a 6-part series, which, once again, walked you through the history of a family, this time being the mammals, and how they rose to dominate the Earth after the demise of the non-avian dinosaurs. And, by the way, this video idea came from you viewers, as I will hold a poll every day after the video releases asking you guys which documentary I should review next. You can see that Walking with Beasts won this week, so make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button so you can decide which documentaries I review. So let's stop wasting time and hop straight into the review. Episode 1 of WWB starts off on a very good note. We start off in Eocene Germany, about 50 million years ago. The main protagonists of the episode are a leptictidium mother and her young, as well as a female Gastornis and a male Ambulocetus. And the starting cast is fabulous, as most Eocene creatures in general are very unknown, but WWB chose the best of the best. The whole episode is centered around beginnings. The Gastornis is said to be one of the first members of the terror bird family. We will get to the obvious problem later. And the Ambulocetus as the very beginning of modern-day whales. And even the so-called Propaleotherium are the beginning of modern-day horses, and we even get a cameo from early primates, which would eventually lead to humans. The leptictidium live in the vines of a tree, keeping out of much of the dangers of the forest. The Gastornis has an egg on her mind, as she is about to become a mother, but because of how big she has to lay her egg on the ground where it is open to dangers.
Alone at the edge of a universe humming a tune.
The female Gastornis has to fight off a rival vying for her territory and is successful. Our leptictidium comes across the Ambulocetus as it lays across the road, just chilling in the early morning sun. The Ambulocetus slips into the water as it begins to swim, because it is the early descendant of whales and is a predator, using its body to sneak up on prey on the shoreline, much like modern-day crocodiles, and grab its prey to drag it to the depths. Good old Kenneth then says that the lake is a ticking time bomb, as large amounts of volcanic gas are being brought to the lake's surface, and if enough of the gas gets released at one time, it'll suffocate every animal in its path near the lake. The Ambulocetus tries out the stealth strategy on a Propaleotherium and fails. At midday, the Gastornis chick is beginning to push its way out of the egg when the documentary introduces us to Titanomyrma, a giant relative of the ants that lived in Germany during the time of the episode and are very efficient killers. The yelps of the chick pushing its way out of the egg attracts the giant ants to its location, and something the documentary does very well is not really showing the horde of ants devouring the chick, but by using intense music and shadows and large groups of ants, it feels like the Gastornis chick is in for a very bad time. Then we see the chick starting to be swarmed by the ants until we cut away. We cut to a group of Propaleotherium, which the documentary tells us is not even bigger than most cats, and even that these ancestors to horses didn't even have hooves, but hoof-like structures on their toes. The female Gastornis is hunting the Propaleotherium as she hides from them in the brush. She fails in her hunt, and the mini horses run away. It's the late afternoon now, and the leptictidium and her young are beginning to wake up. The documentary shows us that these elephant shrew lookalikes were actually omnivorous, as we see them feasting on bugs and amphibians. The Propaleotherium have found grapes on the forest floor, and they have fermented, effectively making the horses drunk. At that moment, the mother Gastornis once again tries to get a kill, and she succeeds, as the drunk horses don't act fast enough to the danger. After her kill and consumption of the horse, the mother Gastornis returns to her egg, where she finds it devoured by the ants. Only the bones and a thin layer of blood remain. Most of the animals of the forest go back to sleep as night settles in, and an unlucky dog-like creature, which is never named, although the wiki calls it a member of the creodont family, walks down to the lake bed for a drink. The Ambulocetus lies in wait, trying to get a kill. The Ambulocetus manages to grab the creodont and drag it into the depths. Midnight rolls around and the Ambulocetus goes to sleep on the lake's edge after its kill. The early primates in the trees sense that something is wrong, and at that moment, an earthquake rattles the forest, and the lake releases a large amount of its deadly gas, and this gas subsequently goes through the forest, choking everything to death that it can reach, like this Propaleotherium. Luckily for the Leptictidium, their home was just outside of the gas's path and have survived. The mother comes across the corpse of the Ambulocetus, as it couldn't react in time and was killed in the gas leak. Even though the little mammal survived, the end of the episode explains that the family the Leptictidium occupied were destined for extinction, whereas the Ambulocetus' ancestors would become modern-day whales. That's where episode 1 ends. The episode was pretty good for the time, but a good chunk of the information is now outdated. The most obvious fact is the portrayal of Gastornis. This wannabe terror bird was for a while considered to be an early predator, hunting the small animals of its forest environment. Nowadays, we know that Gastornis was a herbivore, devouring nuts and fruits instead of mini horses. Evidence from its beak being flat and not sharp, as well as fossilized footprints of the bird, revealing no talons whatsoever, and the nail in the coffin on the hunter portrayal of the bird was when isotopic analysis of the bird went into testing and came back as very similar to what modern-day animals that eat nuts and fruit look like. Also, Propaleotherium is no longer a valid genus, now being synonymized with Eurohippus, and Ambulocetus fossils have only been discovered in Pakistan, not Germany. New Dawn was a fantastic start to the WWB series, and in my opinion, it mostly gets better from here, so you know we're in for a good one. Episode 2 of Walking with Beasts is, in my opinion, the second best in the series. We're in what would one day become Pakistan about 36 million years ago, as we follow a female Basilosaurus, the first giant oceanic predator since the mosasaurids went extinct at the end of the Cretaceous. We also have a side group we follow being a herd of Embolotherium and some Andrewsarchus. The Embolotherium have this strange head crest that would have been terrible for defense, but was critical for mating displays. We see the Basilosaurus, and I'm going to say this design is damn near perfect. The very streamlined body makes it look absolutely beautiful. We see two Basilosaurus mating, and the female will become the protagonist for the rest of the episode. The whale's tiny, deformed legs help grip each other during mating, making it easier in the water. Kenneth informs us that the sea is freezing at the poles and throwing ocean currents into turmoil. This is a mass extinction event that, when all said and done, will wipe out 1 in every 5 species off the face of the planet, including Basilosaurus. We cut to the beach, where a group of turtles has just emerged from the sand after a night of laying eggs. Then an enormous Andrewsarchus walks onto the beach in search of food. To this day, we only have one fossil ever discovered of this mysterious animal, that being a giant skull bone. Basically, every interpretation of this animal is just speculation, although most tend to show it being a large wolf-like creature, even though it is not. Time has thrown this creature's classification haywire, as it was originally thought to be a relative of whales, and even relatives of sheep and goats, which is what the documentary pushes. However, recent studies show that Andrewsarchus may have been the sole member of its family, being Andrewsarchidae, and even that it may be an early entelodont, although even more studies suggest it was a close relative of hippos. This genus is a bizarre one, and until we find more fossils of it, we may never know what family it was truly in. However, we do know it to be one of the largest mammalian land carnivores ever, as estimations put it around a ton in weight. This is smaller than the Arctotherium angustidens, however, which would come around much later, about 1 million years ago, and could have weighed probably around 2,800 pounds. The Andrewsarchus then walks down the beach and snags a turtle and crushes its shell with the predator's massive jaws. The changing ocean currents have made the fish stocks that the Basilosaurus depend on run short, and the mother ventures into mangrove marshes to find food, a place that would one day become the Sahara Desert. Her massive size makes her easy to spot for the Apidium that live in the low-hanging trees. There are also Miratherium living in the water. Miratherium weigh about 500 pounds, so the usual sharks don't bother them, so they ignore the Apidium's screeches. These hippo lookalikes are actually relatives to elephants, but they are amphibious and love to float around in the water for food. This Miratherium design might be one of the best that Tim Haynes and crew ever made. One of the Apitium gets absolutely murked by a shark leaping from the waves. The Basilosaurus, though, has eyes only for the Miratherium and begins to hunt one down. The Miratherium in question clambers onto an offshore island to escape from the whale for now, but the tide is coming in, and soon enough the water will rise enough for the hunter to get to its prey. The water has risen to knee height, and the Basilosaurus, who is starving, rushes the hunt and misses the elephant ancestor and nearly beaches itself. This allows for enough time for the Miratherium to rush to safety in the mangroves. The Basilosaurus leaves for open water in search of new food, but she is now becoming desperate. We cut back to the mainland, where there is a prolonged drought, and some of the Embolotherium have died, including a calf. Two Andrewsarchus arrive on the scene to claim this prize, but the mother Embolotherium doesn't understand that her calf is dead and continues to defend it. The mother eventually leaves her calf and seems to realize that her calf is gone. The Andrewsarchus start to play tug of war with the calf for the corpse, but the mother Embolotherium sees the child moving and mistakes it for being alive and rushes in and sends one of the predators flying. Back in the ocean, the Basilosaurus continues to starve to death until she picks up the scent and gets near a Dorodon nursery. Dorodon is a relative of the Basilosaurus and seems to have the same relationship as modern-day orcas and dolphins, where the larger of the two hunt the smaller one. The Basilosaurus finds the Dorodon nursery, and the Dorodon parents try to fight the giant whale off, but it's no use. The Basilosaurus kills multiple of the calves, coming back over and over until the Dorodon have left, and the Basilosaurus is fed and now able to have enough food to further the survival of her baby. When we come back to the Basilosaurus, her baby has been born, and now the pair travel the oceans in search of food, although they are doomed. Kenneth informs us that the Basilosaurus are doomed for extinction, but their relatives will conquer the oceans and become some of the most majestic creatures of today. The episode ends on that note, and I gotta say, easily one of the best episodes in the series, without a doubt. There are some things wrong with this episode, however, and now that I'm thinking about it, nothing off the top of my head comes to me that would make this episode an inaccuracy. Maybe if I'm nitpicking, the documentary calls the Embolotherium Brontothere a lot, which I guess is correct, but the Indricothere in episode 3, that's about to come up, Embolotherium was no Brontotherium, they were of a different genus. Ah, Land of Giants. To many viewers, this episode is not just the best episode in Walking with Beasts, but in all of the Walking with episodes, period. The only one that comes close, in my opinion, is probably Death of a Dynasty, or New Blood, both from WWD. Episode 3 takes place 11 million years after Episode 2 and is placed in Mongolia, and we follow a male Paraceratherium as he grows up and has to learn to be one of the biggest animals ever to walk the earth. The episode starts during the night as we see a giant Paraceratherium in a canyon. It is shown that she is in labor, and she gives birth right there in the canyon to a male calf. But already predators are on the scene in two giant hyenodons who are there to snag the child and get themselves a meal. We fade away from the fight, and it's morning. We see calicotheres walking across the landscape. Even though they look like ground sloths, the documentary informs us that these strange beasts are related to horses. We cut back to the canyon, where we see the mother Paraceratherium and her calf, who has survived the night, as his mother was able to fight off the hyenodons. We cut to a waterhole, where a bear dog is drinking from the bank when an entelodont walks up behind it and scares the bear dog off. I have problems with both the entelodont design and portrayal in the episode, but we'll get to that at the end of the episode. Two of these giant entelodonts start to brawl as they bite at each other's faces. One of these hell pigs defeats the other, and the loser has some pretty damn big gashes. When the calf is strong enough, him and his mother leave the safety of the canyon to go out onto the open grasslands, where we see a large group of these giant rhino relatives walking across the landscape. Kenneth states that the Paraceratherium weighed in at about 15 tons, which is accurate for the estimates we have currently. The calicotheres begin munching on some greens, and the calf Paraceratherium begins to chomp on some fallen leaves from his mother's eating, as even though he's still on her milk, he tries to do adult stuff, a lot like modern-day humans. A hyenodon begins stalking the group and attacks and absolutely destroys one of the calicotheres, biting its neck and crushing its windpipe. After the kill, a group of entelodonts tries to bully the hyenodon into giving up its kill, and the hell pigs end up winning the carcass. A few months have passed, and the lands of Mongolia are in the middle of their drought, and water is hard to come by. The calf Paraceratherium is growing weak, as his mother hasn't had a drink in a while and her milk has run dry. It's not until nightfall that the calf and his mother meet up with an older female who takes them to a small pool of water. The calf quenches his thirst and in the morning finally gets his milk. The rains come, and the land is drenched. The calf and his mother have to cross the riverbank, and his mother gets through pretty easily onto the other side. But the calf is having a hard time of it, and just barely manages to get up onto the opposite bank and follow his mother. His mother then, mates with a male with her calf right next to her and becomes pregnant. Hey, FYI, guys, just make sure you get a bedroom at least. We skip forward 2 years after this, and the calf has grown quite a bit and has picked up some tips from his mother, except in the morning, the calf's mother is kicking the calf out as her baby will be born soon, and she only has the resources to take care of one. The calf leaves to live by himself. Then the documentary does something brilliant. It uses the perspective of actual cameramen on the ground filming this whole thing and informs us that the calf has not been seen for some time, but they're able to spot him walking along a riverbank with a limp in his step. The calf returns to his mother as she is feeding her new calf. The mother angrily turns him away, believing him to be a threat to her new calf. When we see the calf next, he's doing alright, and he is walking very close to an entelodont, but the calf has grown quite large and cannot be touched by the entelodonts. He scares it away, then attacks the camera, knocking it over and walking away to become a huge Paraceratherium. Lovely ending. Insanely good episode, one of the best in the whole Walking With series. There are some inaccuracies and outdated information I do have to address, however. First, let's talk about Paraceratherium. The episode calls it an Indricothere, which is technically correct, but it seems that they're trying to say that Paraceratherium is Indricotherium, which is an outdated take, as Indricotherium is no longer valid. And also the documentary tries to push the idea that Paraceratherium was the largest land mammal ever. This is untrue, as nowadays we believe Paleoxodon to be the largest land mammal ever. Now the entelodont. I do like how they show the entelodont as being omnivorous, eating both plants and animals, which is accurate. The documentary claims that entelodont was not a hunter, however, but a scavenger, and it would bully other predators into giving up their kills. This is probably unlikely. Most omnivores aren't pure scavengers. Modern-day brown bears and black bears still hunt for their food sometimes. It is likely that they would have primarily used the scavenger method, but wouldn't have passed up a hunt. Also, the entelodont's design is wonky doodle. Its cheekbones, which would have been huge in real life, are super pronounced and bony. And to be honest, this is basically the entire body is very shrink-wrapped. In real life, however, the entelodonts would have had huge muscles covering these pronounced cheekbones, making them look much more normal. Also, the documentary calls the entelodont a relative of pigs. This is no longer the case, as nowadays scientists believe them to be much more related to hippos. And finally, we'll talk about the hyenodon. Hyenodon in the show is portrayed as having much of the same attributes as modern-day hyenas. Kenneth claims that they would have eaten everything off the carcass, including the teeth. This may have been true for hyenodons, but you can't apply attributes from other creatures who are not related to one another, even if they have similar names. Also, they are grossly oversized, being called the size of rhinos. The species of hyenodon we are looking at is most likely Hyenodon gigas, who was about the size of a bear. Also, they have weird saber teeth that weren't a part of the real animal, and even so would have been covered by lips. That's the end of episode 3, and a damn good episode it was. You may rest now, soldier. Episode 4 of WWD takes place in the Pliocene epoch in Ethiopia about 3 million years ago, where we follow a young male Australopithecus named Blue as he tries to get accustomed to life in his group after the death of his mother. The beginning of the episode shows this off, as Blue's mother was the leader of her group, and now Blue's status is pushed down to the bottom of the pecking order, as if he can't get accustomed to his group, he might die from abandonment or from the others not looking out for him. The beginning of the episode also shows off how weird and different Australopithecus was from other apes, as these apes walk upright, being the direct ancestors to humans. I may be incorrect about this, but apart from the brand new Prehistoric Planet Ice Age show where we see Enhydriodon take on some scimitar-toothed cats, we have never seen Ice Age Africa in a series. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. We see how much of the fauna living at the time of the episode, rhinos, zebras, and warthogs, were the same or similar to how they look today, but we also see prehistoric animals like the saber-toothed Dinofelis and the gigantic Dinotherium, which was significantly larger than modern-day elephants and had tusks that pointed downwards to rip tree bark off trees for them to eat. Blue is an outcast in his group as he struggles to make connections without his mother. One male named Hercules is vying to be the new leader of the group, trying to usurp the existing leader Gray. But for now, Gray fights Hercules off. Another creature that has a good amount of screen time in the episode is the Ancylotherum, which looks quite a bit like the Calicotheres from episode 3, probably due to budget issues. I guess Ancylotherum was a relative to Calicotheres, but they look almost identical. Some Dinotherium walk past and fight off the Australopithecus from the watering hole. A gang of male Australopithecus try to take over Blue's troop's territory, and the gang is able to take over the territory, and now Blue and his troop have become homeless. Also, holy good lord, the shot right here is breathtaking as we see the Australopithecus walking along a cliff edge with a huge waterfall in the background. The Australopithecus seem to have found a haven up north, but they will soon learn their good fortune isn't going to last. In the morning, the group walk right through a herd of Dinotherium, which turned out to be a very costly mistake. A male Dinotherium absolutely hauls ass after the apes and runs the group down to a tree where they are safe. However, a young Australopithecus got lost in the confusion, and for some goddamn reason, the baby starts yelping as loud as it can as if it is a teenage emo kid. The Dinotherium barrels at the kid like a drunk driver going 90 in a school zone at 8 a.m. and seems to flatten the young ape, but he pops up unscathed. The Australopithecus really shows off their brain ability to scare off the Ancylotherum using loud noises and making themselves look bigger so they can have the fruit to themselves. One of the females has found an egg and gets it promptly stolen from her by Gray, and then because Life decides to give her the double middle finger, gets ambushed and killed by a Dinofelis who has been stalking the group for a while now. At night, Blue begins to start to grow his social bonds and begins grooming Gray and starts to become a member of the group. Hercules, the next day, then fights off a large group of vultures from a dead zebra, and the apes are able to get a little bit of protein into their diet. And Hercules resumes his fight with Gray, and this time defeats him and claims the position as leader of the group. Later, the Dinofelis returns and the group scrambles up a tree, but Blue is left unattended on a rock in clear position for the Dinofelis to attack. But in a very heartwarming moment, the group attacks the cat by throwing stones and branches at the Sabertooth, and the Dinofelis retreats being defeated. Finally, Blue is accepted into his group, and that is where the episode ends. An absolutely fantastic one, showing off how far humans have come in the evolutionary tree. A few gripes I have with the episode is that it pushes an old myth that Dinofelis was a prominent hominid hunter. Actually, carbon testing shows that Dinofelis was not super interested in apes, and more in zebras, rhinos, and elephants. Animals like leopards were much more interested in hominids during that time. But off of the top of my head, I can't think of any other major inaccuracies. Super good episode and a great representation of Ice Age Africa. We need more. Episode 5, Sabertooth, takes place 1 million years ago in South America, specifically Paraguay, whereas you could have guessed, unless your mother drunk while you were in the womb, the episode is about the Sabertooth and how it dominated South America after it pulled a Columbus and conquered new land with the coming together and making of the Isthmus of Panama. The episode starts with a baby cat being chased by a huge terror bird, and audible sigh right now, if you haven't watched my prehistoric park review, which will be in the car in the corner, this terror bird did not exist, but I'll get to that at the final review of the episode in a bit. The terror bird chases the cub until a much larger Sabertooth saves the cub and fights off the forest rocket, as the episode beautifully portrays that these cats are the dominant predators in this land. The Sabertooth Pride is led by a leader named Halftooth, who, as you could have guessed, only has one of his giant sabers remaining, the other being lost either in a fight or a hunt. We see a whole menagerie of weird and wacky creatures that inhabited South America, like the Macrokenia and giant armadillo things called Dinosaurs, and their huge spiked tails. Two males who are brothers come to challenge Halftooth for supremacy over this pride. Pretty quickly, Halftooth concedes, as 2 pairs of sabers are too much for him. The brothers take over the pride, and immediately the females are not accepting, as the males will have to kill the females' cubs so that they will be able to get the females into heat and be ready to mate, but until then the females won't accept them to be mates. Halftooth retreats to the scrub forest where he will have to eke out a living. 2 of the Dinosaurs start jousting, using their huge spike tails to whack each other. Halftooth stumbles across a giant sloth, or more accurately, Megatherium, probably the most famous of the giant ground sloths, as it uses its giant claws to grab the leaves off of the trees. It was also the biggest ground sloth ever, potentially, as it was about the size of an elephant. The female saber-tooths take their young to a hiding place while they go out hunting, and the males patrol the territory searching for the cubs. The female's target is a herd of Macrauchenia, who the episode portrays as a lanky and trunked mammal, although we'll talk about that more later on. The females set up a trap, much like modern-day lions, and begin stalking the herd. The attack is on, and the saber-tooths begin chasing the herd, who panics and bolts. The packs single out an individual and begins to turn on the burners. The herbivore's dodging and weaving doesn't end up prevailing, and gets brought down by one of the big cats. The cats have to bring the prey down first and hold it so that they can draw the sabers without them having the danger of breaking. The kill is made, and a group of terror birds rushes over immediately to wait for the cats to be finished and eat the leftovers. Halftooth comes across the remains of one of his dead cubs, with its head being decapitated. What the actual fuck? Anyway, later Halftooth begins to stalk a Macrauchenia until the noise of a ground sloth scares the herbivore away. In the morning, Halftooth is back, and this time aims for a young herbivore, but a terror bird leaps out of the brush before Halftooth and kills the youngling. Halftooth, taking his chance, steals the kill away from the forest rocket and claims the carcass for his own. Back with the clan, they are once again feasting on a Macrauchenia when a Megatherium walks up. Kenneth informs us that these supposed gentle giants will go for carrion every once in a while to supplement their diet, which is an absolutely beautiful touch by Tim Haynes and crew, as modern-day animals do the same, like horses eating chicks or hippos eating gazelles and zebras. One of the brothers stands up to the gargantuan beast and gets smacked aside by the sloth's giant forelimbs, instantly killing the cat. The now one remaining and weaker brother and the rest of the pack leave the kill to the sloth. Halftooth, using his sense of smell, finds out that one of the brothers has died, and he presses his advantage and challenges the remaining male to a fight. Halftooth's superior size and intelligence give him the edge over the other cat, and ends up killing him, and is able to reclaim his place as the leader of the pride, and the final brother is dead. And the episode ends with Kenneth stating that the Sabertooths would eventually die out, as the world around them made their specific hunting style useless when hunting fast prey, and thus spelled doom for Smilodon Populator. An absolutely fabulous episode, but of course there are a few inaccuracies. First of all, let's talk about Smilodon pack hunting. Oh boy, here we go. So, throughout history, there have been two main trails of thought, one being that Smilodon were solo animals that lived and hunted alone besides when rearing young. The other side thinks that Smilodon would have lived in some form of gregarious pack or clan or pride. I am personally in favor of number 2, but I don't think it's exactly how it's depicted in the show. First of all, the reason I and many other animal lovers believe that Smilodon hunted in packs was mainly for a Smilodon fatalis fossil found in the La Brea tar pits. The fossil in question was a hip or pelvis bone that had a huge case of hip dysplasia that severely lacerated and tore up the bone and muscle. Now, normally for solo animals, this would spell doom, as if you can't hunt, you die. But this animal lived on even after the injury and died from the tar pits around a year after the injury. However, I don't think that the Smilodon lived in a pride social structure, as there is no sign of sexual dimorphism in Smilodon, meaning that there would have been no point for a pride, as both males and females would be equally equipped to hunt and kill, although it seems likely that it might be like a wolf hierarchy, with the lead male and female mating and the others helping out. Would make sense for how they breed. Although I do like the documentary showing a short mane on the males, something that would have helped them in intro-specific combat. And moving on, let's talk about Megatherium. The giant sloth, commonly shown as having a thick coat of fur, actually might not have had fur, as many researchers and the Prehistoric Planet Ice Age documentary shows that these behemoths, at least the South American species, wouldn't have needed fur, as they might have overheated and died if they did. They probably would have had some sort of elephant-like skin with small hair, like elephants, but mainly bald, and sometimes bald is better. And finally, let's talk about Macrauchenia. The Macrauchenia in the show were shown as very thin, nimble creatures with a long trunk. This has been debated, however, although what is not debated is that Macrauchenia were certainly not skinny. They were muscular and heavily built, and therefore slower than they are depicted in the show. Now, what is in question is the trunk, as recent research and once again the Prehistoric Planet Ice Age show. Damn, the documentary was good. Backtracking real quick, those researchers believe that Macrauchenia would have had a possible moose or saiga antelope type face, as it's not super clear. And because I'm really bored right now, I'm just going to play the clip from my prehistoric park video on talking about Forest raucus and why it didn't live in South America during the time of the episode. Bird about 10 feet tall. If you have watched Walking with Beasts, you probably know what I'm about to say. Here comes the rant. I don't know where the BBC came up with this fake terror bird, but no forest rocket lived in South America at the time of the episode. It's the same in Walking with Beasts, where there is a terror bird living in South America, basically playing second fiddle to Smilodon. This is not the case. Now there was a terror bird living in North America, being Titanus, but Titanus has only been found in the US. Titanus is also specifically told of in the Walking with Beasts documentary.
While these terror birds eat Smilodon's leftovers, their cousins are running riot in Texas and Florida.
The terror birds in both documentaries are probably meant to be Forest raucus. That's just one itty-bitty problem. Forest raucus lived about 9 million years before the episode takes place, and it was only about 8 feet tall, not 10. So the writers just basically made up a terror bird just so that they could add a cooler animal to the roster, even if it's at the wrong time. A lot like what they did with the cave bear in episode 2. Episode 5 was a fantastic and great semi-finale to the show. And now we move on to the finale. The finale to Walking with Beasts. A sad occasion, but we must go on. In the episode, we follow a woolly mammoth group about 30,000 years ago in the North Sea, although it was no sea back then, but a plain where mammoths and rhinos and other creatures prospered. The episode starts on a somewhat dark note as we follow the group of mammoths, and one of the elephants falls into the water through some ice on the lake bed and gets stuck. After some days, the mammoths are forced to abandon their companion to either starvation or being killed by predators. A very grim start to the episode that shows that any one of the group could meet an end at all times, and it will be a dangerous road. We cut to the summer, specifically July, and the mammoths are living comfortably on a green plain as far as the eye can see, with plenty of grass to eat and plenty of herdmates to play with. There is a newcomer in the herd, being a calf, specifically a male. The mammoths are joined by Megaloceros females, a gigantic species of deer, although we'll talk about them more later on. And joined by bison, as now only a small population survives in Europe, most are confined to North America. We see humans on the horizon as they collect mammoth tusks to build them for huts and houses. We go forward to winter again, and snow is covering the ground. Then the mammoths begin their journey to find new pastures, and a long journey it will be. We are in Belgium now, as we see more of the Megaloceros, more specifically males, as they rut for the right to mate. These huge deer, sometimes called Irish elk, were some of the biggest deer to have ever lived. After the fight is over and one of the combatants has won, they are set upon by humans who rush in with spears to attack. One of the Megaloceros escapes while the other is cornered and pierced with many spears until it dies, now food for the humans. More predators are on the prowl, but these aren't humans, they're cave lions who are stalking the mammoths. Their snowy white pelts blend in with the snow around, a great touch by Tim Haynes and crew. When a male mammoth approaches, he finds the lions feasting on a human. The mammoths continue their journey, but on the way they enter the habitat of another species of human, being the Neanderthals. One of these ancient humans stumbles across a gigantic woolly rhino, which was much bigger than any rhino of today. The Neanderthal doesn't realize who it is until it's too late. The rhino charges the human and sends him flying with its huge horn. The mammoths reach their journey's end and meet up with the mother and calf who have been left behind some time ago. Spring comes again and the land is grass and green. The mammoths have shed their furry coats to a thinner but still furry undercoat, and another calf has been born, this time a female. Two of the woolly rhinos begin fighting for territory until one backs down and the other chases them away. But once again, the mammoths are back on the move, but this time the Neanderthals are waiting for the mammoths, but this time they are there to hunt. Night rolls around and the cliff the mammoth walk near is becoming dangerous. The Neanderthals press their advantage and take torches to press the mammoths back. First one, then another of the mammoths falls off the cliff to their demise. The others move on from the scare, and the Neanderthals climb down the cliff to claim their prize. And finally, the episode ends with the mammoths now back at the fresh pastures in springtime, and also in modern-day museum, where Kenneth informs us that eventually we all go the way of the mammoth, or to extinction. An absolutely brilliant way to finish the series. I love that mammoth and Megaloceros design and the aforementioned rhino model, but some are a bit weird. For example, the cave lions look very odd. They have weird saber teeth pointing out that should be covered by lips, but beyond this, not too many problems with designs. The documentary also calls early humans Cro-Magnons, which is an outdated term that has since been changed to anatomically modern human. Well, that was a fun time. Walking with Beasts was an absolutely spectacular documentary that was miles more accurate than its predecessor. It's a great evolution from episode 1 to the next episodes. Lineages are what bring the series together, whether it's the Eurohippus we see later as Calicotheres, or from Ambulocetus becoming Basilosaurus. This presentation of animal families are what make this series truly special. This documentary is what I grew up on, even before I saw Walking with Dinosaurs. This documentary will always hold a place in my heart. Thank you for watching, and make sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos or posts of mine, as I'll be holding another poll the day after this one drops. So this is goodbye for now, and a new video will be in the making shortly. See you guys next time on Raptor Rex Productions.
That's all, folks.